Imagine this for a moment. NASA's most secure servers breached in the middle of the night. 24 gigabytes of classified mission files vanish in minutes. Among them, a mysterious designation, 3I Atlas. Data suggests it isn't just another cosmic rock drifting through space. Its metallic skin, its heat pulses, even its path, all point to something terrifying. A possible machine, not a comet. On the surface, it looked like just another quiet night at NASA. But what happened in the early hours of September 2nd was anything but ordinary. A notorious hacker collective, known only as Event Horizon, launched a digital strike that tore through NASA's most secure walls like paper. In less than 7 minutes, they siphoned off 24 gigabytes of internal data, information so sensitive that even some NASA directors allegedly had no clearance to access it. They didn't stumble onto an open door. They executed a precision attack, carefully timed, exploiting vulnerabilities buried deep within the agency's communication infrastructure. For years, Event Horizon has been whispered about in obscure corners of the internet, described as digital ghosts, cyber phantoms who surface only when they wish to make a statement. And this time, their target wasn't money. It was the truth about the cosmos. Along with the stolen data came a cryptic manifesto. In it, Event Horizon accused NASA of what they called a cosmic cover-up, the deliberate suppression of humanity's right to know what is really out there. They claimed governments have been hiding evidence pointing to technologies and phenomena far beyond what we are permitted to imagine. Their words were chilling. You look to the stars, but your leaders blindfold you. We tore away the fabric of secrecy. Now see what they bury in the dark. At the center of the leak was a mission codenamed Intercept. Officially, it was documented as a tracking program designed to study interstellar debris passing through our solar system. But among the files, one object stood out like a flare in the void. 3I Atlas. Its name coded, its data heavily restricted. The documents indicated it wasn't behaving like a comet, or even like anything scientists had observed before. The files describe Atlas as moving faster than any asteroid ever recorded near Earth, on a trajectory that should have made it impossible to originate in our own solar neighborhood. Even more disturbing, thermal scans showed irregular heat pulses, almost rhythmic, like an engine breathing in the cold of interstellar space. For the first time, we weren't just facing the mystery of a new visitor from beyond the stars. We were staring directly into a question that makes even seasoned astronomers uneasy. Was this natural, or was it engineered? And perhaps the most unsettling truth of all is this: if Event Horizon had not blown open NASA's vaults, the world might have never known the name Atlas. The breach wasn't just a hack, it was a calculated strike that, according to cybersecurity experts, took months, maybe even years to design. Event Horizon didn't randomly penetrate NASA's servers. They dismantled decades of digital armor with surgical precision. According to leaked security logs, the group initiated its assault at 2:14 a.m. Eastern Time, their point of entry. An obsolete remote communications protocol supposedly disabled in 2016. But instead of being dead, it had been rerouted internally for a classified project. In other words, NASA itself had reopened a back door, one nobody was monitoring. That's where Event Horizon slipped in. From there, the sequence was terrifyingly fast. Within 2 minutes, they had escalated access privileges, cloning administrator keys that should have been restricted to NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. By the 3-minute mark, they had bypassed file integrity systems designed to detect tampering in real time. By 7 minutes, entire drives were duplicated, mirrored, compressed into encrypted blocks, and then scattered across anonymous offshore servers. NASA's alarms went off, but too late. By the time their emergency teams pulled the plug, 24 gigabytes of data had already vanished into the digital abyss. Event Horizon celebrated the heist not with silence, but with spectacle. Just hours later, they surfaced on the deep web, leaving behind a layered communique. It began with something chilling. The vault is open. Secrets of the sky now belong to everyone, not only the few. Their tone wasn't boastful. It was almost evangelical. They portrayed themselves as liberators, not thieves. They argued that humanity had been deliberately kept in the dark about cosmic discoveries, and that NASA had become less an explorer of the stars and more a keeper of secrets. What makes this claim even more unsettling is the language used in their so-called manifesto. Beyond condemning secrecy, they hinted at the existence of multiple incidents that never reached public eyes. They wrote, "You were told Oumuamua was just a rock. You were never told it changed course without reason. You were told comets are frozen wanderers. You were never told their skins sometimes shine like steel." For most readers, this kind of tone might sound like science fiction, but to those who dug deeper, their references were uncomfortably specific. The files included dates, mission codes, even names of personnel allegedly restricted from speaking outside secure chambers. The implication was clear. If true, NASA wasn't just reluctant to share information, it was actively quarantining evidence that could alter everything we think about space. Investigators attempting to validate the breach noted something unusual. The hack left behind virtually no trace of intrusion, no malware, no lingering exploits, nothing that traditional forensics could analyze after the fact. The only digital fingerprints were the files themselves, cascading into darknet exchanges within hours. It was as if Event Horizon had designed their attack to leave behind not chaos, but proof, a trail of undeniable documents too big to erase. And what exactly was inside? Alongside technical memos and routine operational data, there were documents stamped with red borders, clearly marked Top Secret Cosmic Eyes Only. These weren't just ordinary restricted files. According to cybersecurity specialists who glimpsed their headers, that classification tier isn't even meant to exist within NASA's framework. It hints at a cross-agency clearance system, perhaps involving the Department of Defense, that deals with materials so sensitive that only a handful of individuals on Earth would ever have access. The implication sparks questions bigger than the leak itself. Why would orbital trajectories and obscure mission logs be placed under a classification level usually reserved for nuclear codes and covert military assets? Unless, of course, the data revealed more than orbital mechanics. And this is where the story begins to bend from the technical into the extraordinary. Event Horizon's statement continued, "You believe space is silent. It is not. You believe comets drift. They do not. Open your eyes. Atlas was not born. It was built." These words, when first posted, were ridiculed by some as grand cyber drama. But when cross-checked against the stolen files, they align disturbingly well. The documents didn't just mention an object named 3i Atlas. They described anomalous data gathered during a mission labeled Intercept. The mission timeline predates the public acknowledgement of any object matching its trajectory, which raises one alarming possibility. Had NASA already been monitoring Atlas long before anyone outside the agency even knew it existed? And if that's the case, then we have to ask, did Event Horizon really expose a lapse in transparency, or did they uncover something infinitely heavier? Because within those gigabytes of forbidden data lies the first evidence that something wandering through our solar system might not be natural at all, and that truth was never meant to leave NASA's servers. The first waves of files released from the Event Horizon breach didn't arrive in chaos. They weren't spam dumps of raw data with no order. No, what surfaced was frighteningly deliberate, almost curated. Among the thousands of routine logs, telemetry graphs, and mission schedules, there were documents stamped in thick, unmistakable red. Top secret, cosmic intercept. The kind of labeling that suggested these files weren't meant for department heads or mission scientists. These were reserved for the uppermost layers of control, and inside those files the name surfaced again and again: 3i Atlas. The documents were fragmentary, partially censored, but their content was explosive. One internal memo outlined the observations logged during what appeared to be a classified set of telescope runs. It listed the object's approach velocity at 26.1 kilometers per second. That's over 93,000 kilometers per hour. For comparison, Halley's comet moves at roughly 70 kilometers per second at perihelion, and even that is considered extreme. Atlas was moving not only fast, it was moving too fast for a local object bound by the sun's gravity. Another document, a heavily blacked-out report, described what engineers called a plume anomaly. At exactly 11.3 seconds into one observational window, sensors registered a burst, a sudden trail ejecting out from the object itself, like a jet of material. But here's the strange detail. The plume didn't match the chemical signatures expected of frozen volatiles like water ice or carbon monoxide, the kind of gases comets are famous for venting. Instead, its thermal profile suggested something closer to molten alloys being expelled at high temperature. This is not how space rocks behave. This is not how frozen comets behave. The leak also included a blurred capture from NASA's orbital telescope arrays. The image is grainy, and here's where skeptics will often jump in. But even in its distorted form, the light reflecting off the object appears unnervingly metallic, unlike the dull, porous reflection you'd expect from icy aggregates. Atlas shone more like polished mineral or even machined plates. Of course, there are innocent explanations. Materials in interstellar bodies can be unusual. Metallic asteroids exist, some made largely of iron and nickel, but the geometry in the reflections stood out. One report commented on what looked like angular edges, a plane with a straight contour that did not resemble natural fracture. As one anonymous scientist allegedly wrote in an internal margin, "This looks engineered, not fractured." And then, perhaps most chilling of all, were the thermal scans. Several sets of readings collected from different instruments over days, all recorded pulses of heat emanating from the object. Not constant thermal radiation, not random fluctuations from sunlight warming its surface, but repeating bursts. A rising and falling heat signature in rhythmic sequence. One graph showed a pulse approximately every 47 seconds. It looked almost like a heartbeat line on a medical monitor, oscillating with uncanny regularity. Astronomers who examined these logs were divided. Some argued it could be rotational effects where sunlight heated one side, then cooled as the body rotated. But others countered, not at that frequency, not with that consistency. And that's where Event Horizon's Manifesto twisted the knife. They wrote, "Do rocks beat their hearts in cold space? Number, do cosmic machines breathe? Yes, Atlas breathes." If this sounds embellished, know that such rhetoric was tied directly to actual data snapshots embedded in the dump. Graphs, memos, calibration reports. Things very difficult to fake at that level of technical precision. Even cybersecurity specialists tracking the leak admitted either NASA staged a mountain of elaborate pseudo-documents only to be stolen and published at their own expense, or these files are precisely what they appear to be: classified logs of an object not behaving as nature should dictate. For the public, the implications were staggering. But within scientific circles, even whispers of these files caused arguments. Some claimed it was a mix-up, that Event Horizon had misinterpreted leftover data from comet observations. Others whispered more privately. The coding and formatting of these files matched NASA's internal structure exactly. They were not forgeries. What made it worse was the timing. Cross-referencing these leaks with public telescope records suggested NASA had tracked Atlas days, maybe weeks, before it was ever added to general astronomical databases. Meaning, while the world thought it was first spotting an odd new speck moving across the sky, NASA had already been logging, dissecting, and classifying it in secret. So, what did the first evidence show us? A body traveling impossibly fast, venting material inconsistent with natural comets, a surface reflecting light like sheet metal, and heat pulses repeating at precise intervals. These are not coincidences. These are signatures. But of what? The evidence is tantalizing, but not conclusive. It forces a daunting question into the open. Is Atlas simply the strangest rock ever recorded in human history? Or is it the first visitor we've caught in the act of revealing itself as something else entirely? If there is one thing astronomers know how to do with precision, it's track orbits. And when 3I Atlas first appeared on NASA's internal radar, its motion was unlike anything in local space. The leaked reports detail its observed velocity, 26.1 kilometers per second relative to the Sun. That translates to over 130,000 kilometers per hour, a speed far exceeding the escape velocity from our solar system. In plain terms, once Atlas entered our planetary neighborhood, there was never any chance of it slowing down and staying. Its path was what astronomers call a hyperbolic trajectory, open-ended, never to return. That fact alone means Atlas is an interstellar interloper. It did not come from within the solar system. It came from the void between stars, cruising through space for millions, perhaps billions of years before stumbling across our sun's gravity well. For context, the first confirmed interstellar object ever detected by humans was Oumuamua in 2017. Like Atlas, it entered on a hyperbolic path, zipped by, and left forever. But there's a striking difference. Oumuamua, though strange, was eventually explained away, at least officially, as an oddly shaped fragment of natural rock, or possibly nitrogen ice. Skeptics still argue about that to this day. Atlas, however, according to the leaked telemetry, exhibits far stranger properties. The trajectory reports show millimetric deviations in its path, tiny, consistent nudges that cannot easily be attributed to gravitational interactions. Typically, comets experience small trajectory changes when outgassing, as sunlight warms, ices, and jets push the body slightly off course. But Atlas's deviations were not random. They appeared synchronized with the thermal pulses recorded in the leaks. Every time its heat signature spiked, its course adjusted ever so slightly. The implication: not natural venting, but controlled maneuvers. One of the censored charts reconstructed from the files even overlaid those deviations on a simulation map. The result looked disturbingly like the footprints of corrections, the kind of precision adjustments a spacecraft would make to stay on a desired path. The question is, a path to where? Here's another point to consider. The angle of Atlas's entry didn't align with the local standard of rest, the average motion of stars near the Sun. Instead, its approach vector traced back toward a dark region near the constellation Lyra. Coincidence? Maybe. But Lyra is home to one of the most studied exoplanet systems, Kepler-62, which harbors super-Earths within its habitable zone. Now, was Atlas ejected from a system like that? Or, more provocatively, was it sent? Some astrophysicists reviewing the leaked numbers noted that the object's trajectory brought it unusually close to Earth's orbital plane, far closer than Oumuamua. Statistically, that's rare. For an object wandering from the depths of interstellar space, brushing so near our path is like a dart hitting not only the board, but nearly the bullseye. Random chance favors dispersion. Focused aim suggests intent. We should also discuss its speed. At 26.1 kilometers per second, Atlas was fast, but not impossibly fast. That's what unsettles many. If it were traveling significantly faster, one could dismiss it as just another unbound rock speeding past. But its velocity rests right within the margins of what some propulsion models suggest could be achieved by light sail acceleration, thin reflective structures pushed by starlight across immense distances. It may not prove Atlas is artificial, but it keeps the door wide open. Now imagine this. If the trajectory really was altered intentionally, then what does that tell us? Atlas did not just fall blindly into our solar system. It may have targeted it. For what reason? Surveillance? A test run? Or something observers haven't dared to say out loud? NASA's official public commentary on high-velocity visitors has always been measured. Terms like natural body, cometary object, unbound trajectory. But the leaked memos bore a different tone. In one margin note under a trajectory log, a scientist reportedly scribbled, "Course deviation unacceptable, if natural. Where is thrust vectoring source?" That question alone suggests an internal recognition. Something about Atlas did not behave as a normal fragment of space should. The report grows darker when aligned with Event Horizon's rhetoric. The hackers declared, "Atlas does not wander. Atlas navigates." And while that statement seems hyperbolic, the leaked numbers give it weight. Every pulse, every slight deflection seemed calculated, like the gentle steering adjustments of a vessel unwilling to reveal full control, but careful not to drift entirely at random. So what do we truly know from the trajectory? Atlas entered too fast to belong here. It traced a path from interstellar space, not circling back, not bound by our sun. Its course shifts aligned suspiciously with heat pulses, implying maneuvering. And it passed far closer to Earth's orbital plane than chance should ordinarily allow. We stand at a frontier of unsettling possibility. Either Atlas is the strangest cosmic rock ever witnessed by humankind, or it is something else entirely. And if it was navigating, even just a little, then an even more haunting question echoes. Who or what planned its path across the stars, straight into ours? Astronomers have spent centuries cataloging the strange shapes and surfaces of asteroids and comets. Jagged, porous, irregular, these bodies are usually nothing to look at. Dust-covered rubble piles scarred by billions of years drifting in silence. But according to the leaked data, 3I Atlas did not look like rubble at all. The first images outlined in the files came from spectrographic arrays orbiting Earth. At first glance, the results looked like standard comet readings, reflected sunlight, measured across multiple wavelengths. But the reflection curve didn't match porous ice, carbon dust, or silicate rock. Instead, the albedo seemed unnaturally high. Parts of Atlas reflected light almost like polished metallic alloys. That single anomaly set off alarm bells. The files include side-by-side comparisons, one panel showing a typical comet core, its surface dull and matte. The other showing Atlas displaying specular reflection, that sharp mirror shine associated with refined surfaces, not erratic natural ones. One analyst inside the files actually wrote, "Resembles machined plate more than regolith." This reflected light wasn't the only surprise. Instruments captured faint geometric features, apparent lines, ridges, and even planar facets, too precise to square with natural rock fractures. One blurry but telling image displayed a diamond-shaped plate bordered by what looked like a groove running in a straight line across its edge. Natural processes can carve irregular cracks, yes, but grooves running at perfect angles? That's harder to explain as coincidence. Some scientists noted similarities to metallic asteroids rich in iron and nickel, but Atlas seemed different. Metallic asteroids are dense, heavy, scarred with irregular dents. Atlas showed symmetry, not perfect, but suggestive, angles that hinted at construction. The leaked notes also reference something unnerving called the radiator problem. Essentially, thermal readings recorded sections of the surface radiating heat, as though they were designed to vent excess energy, like radiator panels on spacecraft. Normal comets don't radiate heat like this. They sublimate gases sporadically when sunlight hits. They do not distribute heat evenly across what looks like structured panels. Now, skeptics will say, data can be misleading. Instruments can produce artifacts, creating the illusion of clean lines where only jagged slopes exist. But multiple instruments across different sessions all log these features. Even radar echoes bouncing off the object suggested unusually smooth patches. And smoothness in space debris is suspicious. Natural rock is chaotic. Smoothness implies shaping. One particular section of the leak stood out, a classified diagram overlaying Atlas's surface patterns. Lines traced across it highlighted intersections almost like bolts or seams. The document's anonymous reviewer even wondered, potential thermal ribbing, purpose unclear. If natural, unknown mechanism. This is where the debate becomes sharp. On one hand, plausible scientific explanations do exist. Heat-fractured crystalline structures can produce linear edges. Metal-rich bodies might reflect more sharply. But then, why the repeating geometry? Why the alleged symmetry in modules? Why plumes that coincided with these reflective edges? To add to the mystery, Event Horizon claimed, though this was not directly shown in the files, that NASA's higher resolution imagery existed, imagery never meant to be declassified. They taunted in their release. You are being shown blurred fragments. We saw the plates. We saw the seams. Ask NASA why you do not. Whether that's bravado or fact remains unknown. But even the publicly reconstructed data fits poorly with the comet label. Consider this. When sunlight hit Atlas, the spectral emissions fluctuated as if some surfaces were made with different materials. One region reflected like bright alloy. Another section behaved like carbon composite. If this body is truly natural, then it somehow fused together metals and composites not commonly deposited in the same structure. That's not impossible, but it is extraordinary. Adding urgency to the mystery were the thermal snapshots. At intervals, parts of Atlas's surface lit up hotter than the rest, aligned exactly with those geometric zones. Imagine looking at what should be random moon-like craters suddenly glowing like heat exchangers. It is no wonder that some of NASA's internal notes question whether they were seeing components meant for a hidden function rather than random geology. Link this back to previous interstellar visitors. Oumuamua puzzled scientists because of its strange acceleration, which some suggested might be explained by a thin reflective sail. Atlas, however, carried something more resolute in its signals, the appearance of hardware. Theories spread that perhaps Atlas wasn't one coherent rock at all, but a hollowed object wrapped in plating, built to endure interstellar distances for eons. But think of the implications. If Atlas carries hardware, then someone, or something, engineered it, perhaps millions of years ago. Perhaps not. If it's hollow, What lies inside? Storage, instruments, passengers. That line of thought crosses into uncomfortable territory, but the leaked reports don't rule any of it out. In fact, one notorious line in the files hinted, structural geometry exceeds cometary morphology. Comparison with engineered surfaces advised, sensitive classification required. Astronomers in the mainstream community will demand restraint. Reflections can mislead. Angles can appear where none exist. But the leaked documents never dismissed the anomaly. They cataloged it with clinical precision and left open questions without resolution. And that silence, from within NASA, fuels the suspicion. In truth, we don't yet know what Atlas's surface really is. Polished metal, exotic rock, artificial plating. Each answer opens new doors and new fears. Because if its skin is metal, and if those seams are seams, then Atlas is not just an interstellar traveler, it is an interstellar design, and it passed closer to Earth than any ship from the stars ever should. Movement is one of the easiest things to measure in space. A rock drifts under gravity. A comet may sputter and shift slightly as its frozen gases ignite in sunlight. But objects do not move with regularity, with rhythm, with intent. According to the leaked files, that is exactly what Atlas did. The thermal readings, when plotted over time, displayed a repeating pattern that sent chills through the scientific staff who analyzed them. Instead of random spikes caused by sunlight hitting jagged ice pockets, the heat distribution came in pulses, bursts of thermal energy spaced at consistent intervals. One report noted emissions rising in a near-perfect cycle every 46 to 48 seconds. That kind of frequency isn't consistent with natural outgassing. Nature is messy, chaotic, unpredictable. These heat signals appeared controlled, and then came the correlation that shook even the skeptics. Each thermal pulse aligned with minute course adjustments. The files described changes measured in fractions of a degree, but measurable nonetheless. A slight nudge here, a small drift correction there. Over time, these tiny maneuvers added up to an unmistakable pattern. Atlas was steering itself. NASA's official explanation in the sanitized sections of the files suggested non-gravitational acceleration, the kind comets often experience as jets of sublimating gas push irregularly. But if that were the case, the adjustments would be erratic. Atlas's course was neither random nor chaotic. It was precise. One internal log entry even included the remark, "Trajectory now resembles guided maneuvering rather than stochastic venting." Radar data added another layer. Bursts of electromagnetic reflection appeared that didn't align purely with the object's spin or surface geometry. Some engineers speculated they were echoes of active emissions, small amounts of energy released as thrust. Which begs the question, was Atlas producing propulsion? And if so, what was fueling it in the void? The files also contained a disturbing comparison to human spacecraft. One chart overlaid Atlas's pulsing energy with telemetry from maneuvering thrusters on probes like Voyager and New Horizons. The resemblance wasn't perfect, but it was close enough that one unnamed analyst scrawled, "Analogous to RCS propellant control, non-random." Open the implications here. If Atlas is adjusting course deliberately, then what is its target? Its path through the solar system brought it closer to Earth's orbital plane than statistics should allow. Some scientists pointed out that gravitational slingshot mechanics could explain this, an accidental near miss created by millions of years of travel. But others whispered about impossible odds. Why Earth? Why here? Conspiracy theorists immediately seized upon this narrative. Event Horizon themselves claimed, Atlas did not fall into your system. Atlas entered it. Atlas corrects its path. Atlas hunts. Dramatic. even paranoid words, but paired with real telemetry, they take on an unsettling resonance. But let's step back for a moment. Could there be natural but extraordinary causes? Some astrophysicists argue that complex venting, combined with shape, could mimic deliberate thrust. An elongated body warming at specific angles might pulse in light and heat. Yet skeptics counter, why at perfect repeated intervals? Why paired with measurable deflections that look calculated rather than accidental? Moreover, the files revealed bursts of radio frequency noise detected in sync with the pulses, nothing resembling a coherent signal, but still. Why radio noise at all? Rocks don't radiate in structured bursts. Engineering does. One particularly eerie incident was logged during observation by the Deep Space Network. At the precise moment Atlas recorded one of its heat pulsations, the receivers briefly spiked with a narrow-band signal. It was dismissed officially as interference from Earth, from satellites, from cosmic background sources. But the timing was suspicious. On the exact second Atlas's course shifted, the instruments registered a flash. And then there is momentum. Every adjustment Atlas made, no matter how small, required energy. Energy has to come from somewhere. For a comet, the fuel is ice, water, carbon dioxide, methane sublimating violently. For Atlas, the expelled material measured in traces suggested heavier compounds. Some reports even hinted at alloys, microscopic droplets of metallic vapor. Who has ever heard of a comet exhaling molten metal? The leaked memos debated this furiously. Was it real data, an artifact, or clear proof of exotic propulsion? Scientists who wanted to stay within bounds argued anomaly. Scientists who dared to speculate wrote chilling footnotes. Evidence cannot exclude directed propulsion. Subject requires further classification. Imagine the implications. If Atlas truly propelled itself across star systems, whether intentionally or as an automated machine, the distance it may have traveled becomes unimaginably vast. Even moving fractionally faster than passive rocks, it could cover thousands of light years across deep time. That would mean we are not just looking at an ordinary relic of another system. We are looking at technology. But then comes the uncomfortable question: if it is technology, is it active or derelict? Are we witnessing a dead craft running on residual systems, sputtering like an old machine left adrift? Or are we seeing a probe correcting its path because its mission continues, even now, watching us as it passes? For now, all we know rests in the leaked files, pulses of heat, tiny course adjustments, radio echoes at suspicious times, metals expelled where only ice should vent, data that doesn't map onto anything natural, and that forces a haunting verdict. Atlas moved like no comet ever had. Something about it knew where it was going, or at least refused to drift like meaningless rock. And once you accept that possibility, one question grows louder against the silence of the stars. If it steers, then who or what is steering it? Up until this point, the evidence surrounding Atlas can still be forced, however uncomfortably, into the box of natural phenomena. Strange surfaces, unusual trajectories, odd heat pulses. Science can stretch itself to invent explanations if it must. But what emerges in this chapter of the leaked files pushes beyond that boundary. For the first time, Atlas begins to look less like a cosmic rock and more like a piece of technology. The most startling data came not from visual imagery or orbital tracking, but from radar echoes. NASA's Deep Space Network sent targeted pings toward Atlas, and the leaked reports recorded something strange. Instead of scattering like ordinary rock, parts of the signal bounced back with a sharp amplitude, structured almost like reflecting off smooth, flat components. Even more bizarre, buried within the noise was a faint, repeating modulation. It didn't decode into language or numbers, but its statistical pattern resembled responses rather than blind scattering. One engineer's handwritten note summarized it in 4 chilling words. "This looks like reply." Then came the fragment. According to the Event Horizon leak, a tiny particle, microscopic in scale, was collected by NASA's dust analysis instruments as Atlas passed within range. The fragment, logged under a restricted file, was allegedly composed of a lattice of silicon, with trace amounts of phosphorus arranged in a pattern unmistakably similar to a semiconductor wafer. Natural silicates form chaotic structures. This was ordered, layered at intervals measured in nanometers. One memo included in the cache is especially damning. It stated, "Sample morphology inconsistent with natural crystalline deposition. Neural to exclude artificial fabrication at this stage." In other words, even NASA's internal scientists could not bring themselves to rule out the unthinkable, that the fragment was engineered. Of course, caution rules the scientific mind. Alternate explanations were proposed. Could the fragment have been contaminated from human instruments? Could it have been a rare microstructure formed under exotic interstellar conditions we barely understand? Possibilities, yes, but none explain the precision symmetry captured in the microscope images. More evidence emerges when we connect this with the anomalous pulses already discussed. Several files cross-reference the energy burst with models of controlled thermal regulation. In spacecraft, radiators often vent excess heat in rhythmic waves to protect electronic circuits, to balance energy distribution. Atlas's pulses match this concept with uncanny fidelity. A natural object has no need for this. A machine does. Equally unsettling were the internal memos from consulting scientists. Hidden among the jargon are plain-spoken comments, not iterative of comet morphology. Thermal regulation indicates possible system integrity, and most direct of all, cannot exclude engineered origin. These words, stripped of speculation, show a kind of restrained panic inside the halls of NASA. Event Horizon seized these memos and, of course, amplified them. In their public statement, they declared, "You asked for proof. You begged for evidence. We tell you, Atlas carried circuits. Atlas carried guidance. Atlas carried message." Again, the language drips with drama, but even stripped of their exaggeration, the data itself is haunting. We must also consider historical parallels. In 2017, with Oumuamua, a few scientists, including Avi Loeb of Harvard, openly suggested the idea of artificial technology, perhaps a solar sail. He was widely ridiculed at the time. Yet here, less than a decade later, leaked files from within NASA's own vaults show evidence far more explicit than Oumuamua ever provided. Not just acceleration or anomalous shape, but semiconductor fragments, radiator-like patterns, and radar returns resembling deliberate reflection. Skeptics will say the same thing as always. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. And that is true. But if Atlas is artificial, even just a possibility, then humanity's silence becomes deafening. Because if an object can cross interstellar space carrying fragments of advanced material, then we are not simply watching a visitor. We are witnessing a messenger from another intelligence, alive or long dead, pass through our solar neighborhood. And this leaves us with the most terrifying question yet. What if Atlas didn't simply pass by? What if it observed? The files mention on more than one occasion that its pulses aligned with Earth-facing vectors during observation windows. Was that coincidence or scanning? As one internal summary chillingly concluded, further collection terminated. Public disclosure unacceptable at this stage. Those words, buried in the leaks, mark a wall, the line where scientists stopped asking questions not because there were no answers, but because the answers were too big to face. So what do the leaks leave us with? Radar reflections too sharp for random stone, heat regulation like machinery at work, fragments resembling microchips, internal memos unable to dismiss an artificial origin. And if even part of that is true, then the conclusion is inescapable. Atlas was not simply a rock, it was a machine. Maybe crippled, maybe ancient, maybe only fragments of its original design, but a machine nonetheless. And if machines wander among the stars, how many more are out there, right now, crossing paths with worlds that never expected to see them? When the leaks of Atlas first reached public awareness, the scientific community reacted with a mix of fascination, fear, and outright denial. 3 minutes of reading these files is enough to understand why. They straddle the line between hard data and the unimaginable. On one side, NASA's official stance remained firm. Atlas was described as a cometary body. Unusual, yes, but consistent with the unpredictable catalog of interstellar debris. Their press releases used technical terms like non-gravitational acceleration and irregular albedo variation, words meant to smother the flame of speculation under a blanket of jargon. For the public record, Atlas was nothing more than a frozen rock thrown into our skies by chance. But behind the scenes, if the files are taken at face value, not everyone inside agreed. Anonymous commentary embedded within the leaked memos painted a picture of quiet dissent. One scientist scribbled, "Signal response resembles designed echo. Do not publish." Another wrote bluntly, "Cannot account for symmetry of reflectivity." Data withheld? The tension between disclosure and suppression could not be clearer. Even beyond NASA, the wider scientific world fractured into debate. A number of astrophysicists pointed to Oumuamua, the first interstellar object identified, and argued that strange behavior isn't unprecedented. Others, particularly those familiar with propulsion dynamics, admitted the Atlas data raised questions natural explanations struggle to answer. The crucial divide is this: skeptics insist it is safer, more rational to assume nature even when the evidence strains the definition of natural. Advocates of the artificial hypothesis argue that dismissing potential technology is not caution, but blindness. As one commentator phrased it, if it walks like engineering, reflects like engineering, and maneuvers like engineering, why must we keep calling it a rock? Event Horizon reveled in this confusion. Their message boards framed the leaks as proof humanity had already encountered alien technology, and that the establishment was scrambling to contain the fallout. They quoted selectively from the files, amplifying the most damning fragments, while daring skeptics to explain away every anomaly. Meanwhile, NASA's silence grew louder. The agency refused to confirm or deny the authenticity of the documents, claiming instead that their servers had suffered from an attempted intrusion without sensitive loss. Yet cybersecurity experts challenged that narrative, pointing out digital hash signatures identical to authentic NASA logs. Put simply, the leak looked real. So here we are, stuck between opposing truths. Official channels maintain Atlas was an exotic comet and nothing more. Internal evidence, if genuine, hints at deliberate design and hidden systems. This debate has no resolution yet, only a growing shadow. And as the arguments rage on, one haunting question lingers. Was Atlas nature at its strangest, or technology at its oldest? When we step back and look at the entirety of the Atlas leak, one truth becomes undeniable. Something extraordinary passed through our solar system, Whether you choose to believe it was nothing more than a comet or something far more engineered, it changed the way we think about the unknown. The leaked files tell us three things with certainty. First, Atlas was real. The object crossed our skies in full view of government telescopes. Second, the data was authentic, too detailed, too consistent across instruments to be dismissed as fabrication. And third, not all of it added up. Metallic surfaces, rhythmic energy pulses, fragments resembling designed circuits, each on their own might be an anomaly. Together they form a picture that resists simple explanation. But here's the deeper question: why silence? If these files are genuine, then withholding them suggests fear, not only fear of panic, but fear of admitting we are no longer alone. It is easier for agencies and for governments to cling to the comfort of cometary labels, to pretend Atlas is just another frozen wanderer. Yet humanity has always lived at the edge of questions larger than ourselves. The telescope brought us the galaxies. The radio brought us whispers from stars. Now, leaks like these hint that perhaps the universe has already reached back toward us and slipped away just as quickly. So ask yourself, do we prefer not to know, to remain ignorant under a comforting sky? Or are we ready to confront the possibility that our first contact with intelligence beyond Earth has already happened, without our consent, without our control, and without our preparation? Because what is clear is this: 3I Atlas was not ordinary. And if we've already missed one visitor, what will come next? If Atlas was only the beginning, what else has already slipped past our skies, undetected, unacknowledged, hidden in silence? The story doesn't end here, and what comes next will change everything you thought you knew. Don't look away.